Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be doing a crackle effect on fabric using maizena, which is also known as corn flour. This is something you use in cooking. So I have in my bowl here 2 teaspoons of maizena, and I've added some water and I've microwaved it at 30-second intervals. This actually will cook it, so to speak, and release the starches so that instead of becoming a liquid with just a grainy substance in it, I've now got this thick goopy paste. And I'm going to paste this all over my piece of fabric. This is cotton fabric that I'm working on, and you can see by the creases that it is cotton. Cotton creases really easily. You want to make sure that when you buy fabric from the fabric shop that you just rinse it in cold water before you start working, because often when fabric is sold in the fabric shops, it has come with a layer of what is known as size or starch on top of it, just so that it stays good on the roll and looks nice for presentation. That's why newly bought fabric that you get from the fabric shops, you'll notice is quite sort of firm to the touch, and that's just for appearance's sake. If you have that layer of starch on your fabric before you start, you're going to find it really difficult to get this technique to work fantastically well, because there is already a layer of starch on it, so it's going to obstruct what we're doing today. So I normally just fold my fabric, put it in a basin of cold water for about 10 minutes, making sure that it penetrates all the folds, and just leave it to let the starch soak out, and then just hang it up on the line. That way I minimize the ironing. I'm not a great fan of ironing unless I'm doing a sewing project. So it does make it a lot easier that way. So you'll see that this is quite a creamy substance, and it's easy to apply onto the cotton. The cotton is going to stretch a little bit as you work, so you might need to just adjust that on your surface. I'm working on a sheet of newspaper because I want to be able to move this out the way when I'm finished and carry on with the next section. So you might find that easy, but you could also do it on a tabletop that you could wipe down. You will need to leave this to dry for several hours because it is going to take a bit of time to dry. So normally what I would do is actually do this at night and then start painting the next day. And because this is a fairly quick way of doing a background, if you have done something as large as a tablecloth and the design has been painted, this is a lovely way to quickly do the background without actually laboriously having to paint each brush stroke. Right, so now that I've painted my surface with this, I'm going to set this aside so that we can continue with the next step of the process. Oopsie, this is all just folding over on itself. Forgive me, I'll be with you in a second. Okay, so I have already here prepared some fabric. This is dried, and you can see it's curled up and wrinkled. It looks a bit like paper that's got wet by and then left to dry in the sun. And you can hear it's got quite a nice crackly sound. So what I'm going to do is to just crunch this up in my hands a little bit. I'm going to tell you now what I'm doing, and then I will do it because it makes a bit of noise. I'm going to crunch it a little bit just to get crackles in the actual corn flour paste that I've put on. There we go. I know it's not terribly easy to see when it's all white, but it will become apparent in a moment. So I have here on a little palette some extender, which is just a colorless base that's used in screen printing. This is fantastic if you want to reduce the intensity of a color. So I have a navy fabric paint here, but I find that that's very dark for what I'm doing. So I'm wanting now just to actually mix that into the extender, and you can see how easily that this is actually making the color less intense. Think of having a bottle of food coloring on your shelf, and in the bottle itself it's so dark it almost looks black, but the minute you start adding water to it, the color becomes less intense to the point that you can actually even get a pastel color. So that's in fact what I'm doing here with the fabric paints. Extender is also known as clear cut or emulsion, and you can normally get that from a screen printing shop, and it's fantastic. You can buy pigments loose and then you're able to make your own paints. So what I'm going to do next is to take a piece of sponge, which I have here, and I'm going to want to rub this over the surface of my corn flour resist and allow this to penetrate the cracks that have been made. So you'll see that it's covering here nicely. The corn flour does make very fine cracks, so it's not something that is easily noticed to begin with. I'm going to just do this twice so that I actually press down the color into the cracks and I get a nice result at the end of the day. If you're wanting to see what your results are going to be like, you can usually turn over to the back and you can start to see where the paint is penetrating the fabric. So although it doesn't look as though anything is happening here, you just need to trust the process and carry on. So I'm using the sponge because I can press down nicely on it. It's quite slippery on the surface of the fabric because this is starchy. And I'm just pressing all the way down just to make sure that I get a nice even coverage. Okay, pressing into the cracks and just checking on the back how it's coming along. So I'm going to set this aside and I'll show you in the thumbnails what the results are like. I'm sure you'll be very pleased. Bye for now.